So we talked about a totalitarian dictatorship that's coming from the left with Stalin, but I want to examine the two totalitarian dictatorships that are coming from the right in this period, fascist Italy under Mussolini and fascist Germany under Hitler. So let's first bring ourselves back to understand how Italy is structured politically and what might make the state vulnerable to give rise to a dictator after World War I. So if you remember from the unification period, Italy was a liberal state. It had a constitutional monarchy, that is. So even after the unification period, you did still have a king, but you also had a prime minister. The liberal constitution of Italy did preserve civil rights, and also it had universal male suffrage. So politically, you saw that Italy was definitely much more progressive, emerging from the unification period. But one of the lingering problems in Italy that is going to make the state vulnerable, that again could make it so that a dictator could rise to power, is that there's a huge divide between the rich and the poor in Italy. You might remember from the unification period that I tried to stress that Italy was only politically unified, right? It doesn't really have a social sense of unity. It doesn't have an economic sense of unity. In the northern parts of Italy, the state is much more industrialized, and then in the southern areas, it's still very rural, so much poorer. So you're going to see after World War I, these economic differences between North and South are going to become that much more present. There are going to be some significant economic problems that linger in Italy. You're going to see again that the rural population still remains very poor, but the urban population is able to emerge and have more economic success. You're going to see that the people who are successful economically tend to be a little bit more conservative politically, and they also are very afraid of the potential of socialist revolts among the urban working class and among the agricultural classes. So you're going to see a lot of class tension emerge in Italy because of this fear that the have-nots are going to revolt. Again, basically a fear that socialism or communism is going to spread worldwide. We know that this is a very tangible fear after World War I, after people witnessed the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. So you also see that that not everyone in Italy really felt attached to the national state. When you made your way farther south in Italy, peasants actually still felt very attached to their local governments and really didn't feel allegiance to the national state. So there's a huge difference between north and south, between urban and rural, between rich and poor in Italy. Another thing that is making the state vulnerable is that Italy did not feel like it was treated fairly in the Versailles Treaty in 1919, ending World War I. Italy actually wanted to receive more territory. It thought that it was going to get some Austrian land, and it also thought that it was going to get some Ottoman land. And they also thought that they were going to be given some of Germany's former colonies in Africa. So they're really very, very disappointed by the negotiations in Versailles. Actually, the Prime Minister, Vittorio Orlando, was so upset by how Italy is treated in the Paris Peace Conference that he storms out of the conference before it's even over. Also, the Depression, this is before the Great Depression, there is an economic depression that hits Italy in 1919. And you're going to see that this again shows some of the major divides between the rich and the poor, and how much of a problem class tension is. You're going to have workers that were promised social and land reforms if they supported the war. And this actually doesn't happen. So, this working class kind of felt like the government was breaking its promises to the people. And again, some of these people are going to become that much more attracted to communism and socialism because they feel like their government is failing them. Again, you're going to see the wealthy classes be very nervous about communist revolution, and so they're really looking to a leader that's going to be strong and anti-communist. So actually, this is one of the reasons why fascism becomes attractive to the wealthier classes. They think that this is going to, having a little bit more total control over the people is going to prevent potential communist or socialist revolts. In 1921, you're going to have revolutionary socialists, conservatives, and property owners. So this is an interesting divergent group of people coming from the left and from the right. All are opposed to the parliamentary government. Why? Some of it is because the parliamentary government actually is having more significant influence from a strong Catholic party that is growing during this time, and a lot of people don't like the persistence of the Catholic Church and its involvement in the government in Italy. Also, all these groups, again, socialists, conservatives, and property owners, are opposed to the current parliamentary government. But the problem is that because these groups are so different, again, some of them coming from the left, some of them coming from the right, they really don't have any sense of agreement about which direction Italy should take. So in some ways you see that fascism became appealing to certain people because it was, again, a way to kind of control potential emergence from the left. But what we're going to see is that the fascism in Italy is never going to become as strong as the fascism in Germany. And in some ways, actually, some historians see it as kind of a combination of the conservative authoritarianism that existed back in the absolutist days and modern totalitarianism. What we're going to emphasize in Italy was that Mussolini never had complete control over the state in the way that Hitler and Stalin did. So who is Mussolini and where did he come from? He rises to power at first, interestingly, as a socialist. He edited a socialist newspaper, but one of the reasons why he still was able to emerge into power at this time was because at his heart he was an ardent nationalist. He cared more about the future of his country than he cared about his original social ideals. And he organizes the fascist party in Italy. So at first, this fascist party was sort of bringing together socialism and nationalism. Some of the things that the fascists promoted, they wanted territorial expansion. Again, they were upset about some of the disappointments that Italy experienced from the Treaty of Versailles. Also, the fascists wanted workers' benefits, and they wanted land reform for the peasants. So again, you can see that at first the fascists were actually a little bit more left-wing politically. The party was named after the fasces, which were rods carried by imperial Roman officials as symbols of power. So again, at first it doesn't really have to do with a leftist or rightist political ideology, but just the idea of power in general. And we still think fascism, authoritarian power, right? So think fasces, rods, imperial powers, right? This is what the fascists were going for. At first, the fascist party was not particularly successful because there also was a socialist party in place, and they were better organized than the fascists. They had been around a lot longer, and so their competition basically makes it so that Mussolini's fascists don't really go too far. So actually, this is why Mussolini sort of changes gears. By 1920, Mussolini actually starts to take more of a conservative direction. Now, there are going to be increasing numbers of middle-class people in Italy that are becoming really scared of what is happening in the Soviet Union. Remember, the Red Scare is prominent starting in 1918, 1919, 1920 or so. Okay, so this actually causes Mussolini to abandon his original socialist programs and gain more support from the conservative classes and the middle class that's really frightened about the potential of a conservative revolution. So this is a huge change for Mussolini and arguably one of the reasons why he rises to power, because this is the group of people, these conservatives and middle class, that are really looking to a leader that's going to check the power of the people more to the left. So how is Mussolini actually going to gain power? We're going to see that it is a pretty prominent trend for some sort of armed influence, right? A paramilitary organization sort of help guide the way, help someone like Mussolini rise to power. So the black shirts, or the squadristi, as they are called in Italian, this is a paramilitary group that dress in black shirts, as their name indicates, right? And what they are doing is they are actually attacking communists, socialists, any enemy of the fascist program. All right. You're also going to see, as a parallel, Hitler has a group called the brown shirts that are doing the same thing. All right. So what the black shirts are doing is they're really undermining any sense of stability that the Italian government has. They're using a lot of their military power to intimidate people, and also trying to prevent anyone who opposes the fascists from running for office. The black shirts actually force certain people out of their government positions. The black shirts destroy the socialist headquarters in Rome, and they push socialists out of the government. So really what you're going to see is that the black shirts are doing a sort of initial purging of any opponents to Mussolini so that he can effectively rise to power. Also, what the black shirts are doing, which is really important, is they're creating more chaos in the Italian government that Mussolini basically claims he's going to clean up, right? He is seen as the source of stability for Italy, but ironically, it is this group that he is supporting that is actually creating the chaos that he says he's going to end. So Mussolini, how he actually comes to power is he marches on Rome. So in October of 1922, Mussolini basically, along with the help of the black shirts, marches into Rome and demands that the existing government resign. He demands that the king appoint him as prime minister. And so because there's this really large group of fascists that march on Rome to threaten the king, he is so intimidated that he feels that he has no choice but to accept Mussolini's demands. So what happens is that the existing government collapses in Rome. Mussolini gets the right to organize a new cabinet, and he's named prime minister. All right. Also, because things were so chaotic in Rome at this point, again due to the help of the black shirts, that the King Victor Emmanuel III, gives Mussolini dictatorial powers for a whole year because there's so much social unrest in Italy. So again, ironically, a lot of this unrest was created by Mussolini and his black shirts, but then he gets dictatorial powers to clean it up. Now, because the king basically, even though he's forced to, because the king accepts Mussolini's power, you can see his appointment as prime minister as technically a legal ascent to power, which is significant because Hitler does the same thing, right? So why was Mussolini's rise to power successful? First off, the parliament was already unpopular. We talked about how people from the left and right all disliked the parliament. They didn't like the rise of the Catholic Church's role in parliament, for example. And so Mussolini sort of plays off of the fact that so many Italians dislike the parliament, and he also plays off of the troubled economy in the early 1920s to rise to power, right? He also takes advantage of the Red Scare that is persisting throughout Italy. So that's one of the major reasons why it is such a significant turning point that Mussolini turns in a more conservative direction. He knows that the huge threat that the conservatives and the middle class is seeing is, an overthrow from the left. And so by shifting gears and becoming more anti-communist, this is one of the major reasons why Mussolini can successfully rise to power. Also, he's successful because he uses force, right? By using the paramilitary black shirts, there's less of an ability to suppress Mussolini's rise to power. Not only are they paramilitary, but yes, it's important that they're paramilitary, but it's also important that they have such intimidation powers, right? Basically, people will step down from their government positions when the black shirts are threatening to cause them harm. So ultimately, Mussolini is sort of able to clear a path before he actually arrived in Rome. Also, an important example of this is the leader of the socialists in parliament. His name was Matteotti. His name is in your notes that I will share with you. He's actually murdered by the black shirts at this point. So again, using intimidation and taking out very important leaders of the opposition party is one of the major ways Mussolini can rise to power. So in the next video, we're going to look at Mussolini's, how he structures the economy. We're going to look at the extent to which he ever is successfully taking control of the entire state. And then we'll sort of wrap up with Mussolini and move on to Hitler.